Hey folks, this is Chris with Oregon Figs. It is April 14th, 2024, and this is a video that I've been promising that I would put out about thinning and pruning for production on Desert King. Now, first I'd like to give a shout out to Ben B. Seattle and his YouTube channel, which is really a classy channel. He does a great job at editing and he's really good at the video. So I'll give him a shout out, and he's done some really good stuff for the Pacific Northwest. He put out a video called Figs, How to Prune a Desert King Fig or Max Breba Production in the Pacific Northwest. And he went and was given a demonstration by Linda of the Seattle Tree and Fruit Society back in 2017 on how to prune the tree. So a lot of the things I do, I've learned from there. And like many things in figs, the information has probably been out there. It might be scattered, but if you, along your journey, find something that you can do that might be a little different, a different way of thinking, a different angle on something, I encourage you to share that with people. So it's not that these things haven't been done. Most things in figs have been done. Anyone knows that, right? Figs have been around for a long time, but there are differences in how you can do it. And you know what? The occasional shout out doesn't hurt anyone, right? I've given Eric Durchie a shout out for explaining to me how to grow figs in a favorable microclimate. He explained it to me, and I visited him in Santa Barbara, and I saw how he was doing it, and I gave him a shout out. I've given Eric up at the Central Willamette Valley at Lofton Arts, I've given him a shout out for his way of fertilizing his pots in the Pacific Northwest, because it's so great and so easy. He just takes a fertilizer like 1616 and puts it on top of his pots and lets the rain dissolve it into his pots, into his trees. And I've started doing that. That's a great technique. So I try to give the shout out when I think of it. I'm sure I forget sometimes, but shout out to Linda, great video. Shout out to Ben V. Your editing is incredible. Let's get to the tree now. So this is the only piece of 4-year-old wood on my tree. And here's one of those little tricks. Okay, I couldn't get in there with my pruning saw, and I wanted this one cut right down to the ground. So I took my Milwaukee multi-tool, which you can see I've cut a lot of drywall with this, and I have a bimetal blade on, not the right blade, but I didn't have the patience to look for my wood blades. And it does do a nice, thin, fine cut. So that can get you into places where you can't get in and you know, like I would have hit these with a regular saw. I would hit some of these, but I was able to just snip it right out of there. There's a trick that you might find handy at some time. So let's go out and let's look at this branch I just took off. This is 4-year wood, and it was in the center, and it was really clogging things up. Let's see if I can get it out of here. I just left it in there to kind of show how it was clogging things up. And lo and behold, that's my 4-year-old wood on my Desert King. And gonna have lots of nice cuttings. These cuttings are going up to my buddy in the Central Willamette Valley, Josiah. He's going to be rooting a bunch of these because he knows someone that would like to start a DK orchard. So hopefully those go into making a DK orchard. Now here's my little tip number 2, is that instead of cutting your growth all the way down to the ground, you can come up a couple feet. And what that will do is, this year, from a node somewhere in here, a branch will take off. A branch will take off, and that will be next year's wood, and I'll be picking it at this nice, comfortable height from here, maybe up to 6 feet, right? Beautiful for harvesting. I don't want to pick down here at the ground, right? I don't want to cut it to the ground, have a sucker come back and try to pick it down. I'd rather pick it a couple feet off the ground. There's another trick. So part of your thinning cuts that you do, you can come up off the ground a couple of feet. Now I just tied this on here temporarily so you could see that this one was just intertwined with other branches, right? So I just tied it on there for you to see. And cut number 2. That is cut number 2. Now, at this point, I haven't taken any others off. I might take a few more at that 2-foot height off. And then next year I'll be faced with most of these, let's see, I'd say 1, 2, 3, 4 of these growths will be 4-year-old wood next year. And I will take off as much as I feel like taking off. I won't necessarily take it all off. I'll see how the tree is growing, right? Another thing I did, this, when that center branch grew up, this was growing way out. So you know that I always try to contain the footprint of my trees because we have a 0-turn mower. I don't want this thing getting 10 feet wide, right? So what I've done is just supported it and pulled it in. So I've decreased the footprint. And I'm not concerned about light penetration because now I've taken that center out and there's going to be a lot more light. Now I could continue to cut and cut and cut. People think that you have to have tons of air circulation. And honestly, here in the Pacific Northwest, it is so dry in July and August when we get our Breba that I'm not really concerned with air movement. They're going to all ripen nicely. Just like the trees that I saw when I was down in Northern California, they're going to ripen their figs without having sunlight directly touching the figs. And that's another little tidbit. So the next thing is, you know, I use these cages. Let's walk over to my LDA. So I use these cages, and the reason I use these is to prevent the bucks from rubbing the tree. I just had to take a red Lebanese Bacaval, it was an older tree, out because the bucks had rubbed it. And half of the tree was dead. So all the nutrition was being fed by half the tree, and it was just struggling. So I make these cages to keep the bucks off. Well, I made a cage that was very similar to that. Was the first cage I made, and it was when I was trying to keep the bucks away from my DK. This cage was huge, but it taught me that I do like more of a upright growth pattern. And I'll probably pull the same cage back because it's already made. But in the future, I would like to try to keep my Breba producers with a narrow footprint. This is another thing that wasn't mentioned on the video that Linda did. So these are just little additions, right? It doesn't mean I'm reinventing the wheel, but I'm hopefully trying to add to the information that's out there to let people have thoughts of maybe different ways of doing things. So that's what I'm all about. I'm trying to have my experiences, whether they're positive or negative, be something that's a learning point for me that I can share with other people in many cases so they don't have to make the same mistakes. Look at the Bifero Zeus Brebas there. Could this be the year they hold and I get a nice crop? Oh, these are good when they do hold and they ripen. Brown sugar, and they can occasionally get to maple syrup. Huh, dirty hands, somebody's been working. Ooh, look at that nice one up there. So yeah, pretty loaded. Be interesting to see what's going to go on with this tree. So this isn't my Breba report, but I get sidetracked easily. This is the report about pruning a bush format tree and some thoughts of keeping your cut up higher to make it so that you're not picking Breba on the ground, to keep your footprint contained so your tree isn't sprawling all over the place, and to hopefully have a good harvest. I see a lot of figs on this tree, so I don't want to overcut it. They'll all ripen, they'll all be fantastic. I'll cut it, hopefully a little every year, and not overcut it. So this is my take on pruning for Breba in the bush format in my orchard here in the southern Willamette Valley. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I've given a couple of little tricks that maybe you'll use and maybe you won't. But the important thing is to do what Linda did, which was take that tree and control it, right? And that's what her video, it shows a great deal of technique and expertise on control, which is huge. So thank you, Linda. Thank you, all my subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. And I always like a like. So I'm glad I put this video out. Sometimes you put a video out when you're doing this and you go, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I did this one. Okay, thanks so much for watching.